A man stands in the middle of a vast grey ocean on a boat that is slowly dying. He bought this vessel with every cent he ever earned. Years of sweat, missed sleep, and sacrificed comfort are embedded in its wooden planks. But now, there is a jagged hole in the hull. Water is rushing in, cold and indifferent. The man is exhausted, using a small bucket to bail out the ocean, minute after minute, hour after hour. His hands are blistered, and his back is screaming, but he cannot stop. To him, stopping means admitting that his life savings are disappearing into the abyss. He looks at the shore, miles away, and then looks at his bucket. He believes that if he just bails faster, if he just works harder, he can save the value of the boat. The reality is that the boat ceased to be an asset the moment the hull snapped. It is now a weight. Every drop of sweat he spends bailing water is energy stolen from his survival. As the sun begins to set, the boat sits lower in the water. A passing raft whistles for him to jump aboard, but he shakes his head. "I put too much into this," he screams over the sound of the waves. He isn't fighting the ocean anymore. He is fighting his own memory of what the boat used to be worth. By the time the water reaches his knees, he is too tired to swim. He sinks not because the ocean is cruel, but because he chose to anchor his future to a dead past. The moment he could have been free was the moment he let go of the bucket and accepted the loss. In the logic of the sea, the only way to start winning again is to stop paying for a mistake that has already been made. There is a young man sitting in the mud of a foreign pig pen, surrounded by the stench of failure. Weeks ago, he was a man of status, throwing gold coins at high-end tables and surrounded by friends who laughed at all his jokes. Now his pockets are inside out, and the friends don't even remember his name. He is so hungry that the pods the pigs are eating look like a feast. In this moment of absolute collapse, he doesn't shake his fist at the sky or blame the economy. He doesn't wait for a miracle or a handout. He does something much more practical. He performs a mental audit of his own exchange value. He thinks about his father's estate. He doesn't think about his lost inheritance or his bruised ego. He thinks about the hired servants. He remembers that even the lowest paid worker in that house has bread to spare. He realizes that his current market value in this pig pen is zero, but as a hired servant back home, his value would be survival. He stops seeing himself as a failed son and starts seeing himself as a potential worker. He stands up, wipes the mud from his face, and begins the long walk back. He isn't going back to beg for his old life. He is going back to offer a trade, his labor for a steady meal. The pivot happened the second he stopped mourning his lost status and started calculating the math of his next move. He found his way out of the mud by realizing that while he couldn't change the past, he could change what he was willing to trade for his future. A traveler moves down a dusty road, bent double under the weight of a massive burlap sack. Inside the sack are thousands of small, jagged stones. On each stone, a name and a date are carved. One stone represents a business partner who stole a client 5 years ago. Another represents a friend who told a lie. Another is for a debt that was never repaid. To the traveler, this sack is his most prized possession. It is his record of justice. He believes that by carrying these stones, he is keeping the world honest. He refuses to leave them behind because he feels that letting go would be unfair to his suffering. But the road is long, and the sun is hot. Because of the weight, he can only walk a few miles a day. He watches as other travelers, carrying nothing but light packs, sprint past him toward the city of opportunity. He sees chances for profit and growth fly by, but he cannot reach them because he is too busy readjusting the straps of his heavy burden. His legs are trembling, and his heart is strained. One afternoon he collapses under the sheer mass of his justice. As he lies in the dirt, he realizes a terrifying truth. The people whose names are on the stones are not suffering. They are miles ahead, living their lives, while he is the only one being crushed by the weight of their mistakes. He reaches into the bag, takes out a stone, and tosses it into the bushes. He feels a pound of pressure leave his shoulders. He empties the entire sack, and for the first time in years he stands up straight. The air feels lighter. He realizes that forgiveness wasn't a gift for the people who hurt him. It was the only way to clear the ballast so he could finally run at full speed. A man sits in a dimly lit office, staring at a ledger that no longer belongs to him. The news came an hour ago. His master has discovered his mismanagement, and by tomorrow morning he will be stripped of his keys, his seal, and his roof. He is too old to dig ditches and too proud to beg in the streets. He looks at his hands. They are soft, used to ink and parchment, not shovels. Most people in this position would panic, or perhaps try to steal a few gold coins from the chest before the sun rises. But the steward understands a much deeper logic. Currency is temporary, but obligation is a long-term asset. He looks at the hourglass on his desk. He has exactly 24 hours of authority left. After that, his signature is worthless. He begins to send out messengers, summoning every man who owes his master money. The first arrives, a merchant who owes 1,000 gallons of olive oil. The steward doesn't ask for a bribe. Instead, he slides the contract across the table and says, "Sit down quickly. Strike out 1,000 and write 500. The merchant's eyes widen. He is being handed a fortune in a single stroke of a pen. The steward does this again and again, slashing debts for wheat, wine, and gold. He isn't being kind. He is performing a cold liquidation of his master's dying assets to buy himself a future. He knows that when he is thrown out of the gates tomorrow, these men will feel the crushing weight of a massive favor. He is trading a house he is losing anyway for 10 houses that will be forced to welcome him in. He realized that his power had an expiration date, and rather than letting it rot, he converted it into the only thing that survives a crisis: human gratitude and social capital. For 30 years, the merchant has built a comfortable life. His shop is famous for its good pearls, thousands of them, neatly sorted into silk-lined trays. They are pretty, they are affordable, and they have provided him with a steady income, a fine house, and a respected name in the city. He is the master of the decent trade. But one afternoon, in a dusty backroom of a traveling caravan, he sees it. A single pearl, so perfect and so luminous that it seems to hold the light of the moon. It is the pinnacle of existence. The price, however, is not a bag of gold. The price is everything. The seller demands a sum that equals the value of the merchant's shop, his inventory, his house, and his very bed. The merchant stands in the center of his shop, looking at his life's work. To buy the one, he must destroy the many. He must hold a fire sale. He must watch his good pearls, the ones he spent decades collecting, be sold off for pennies just to reach the total. His friends tell him he is insane. Why risk a stable life for a single stone, they ask. But the merchant looks at his trays of decent pearls and suddenly sees them as a burden. He realizes that the good is the greatest enemy of the great. As long as he owns 1,000 average things, he will never have the space or the capital for the one perfect thing. He spends the week liquidating his history. He signs away his deeds, empties his shelves, and walks out of his empty shop with nothing but a small velvet pouch. He is technically homeless, but as he opens the pouch and sees the glow of the absolute, he realizes he has finally traded his clutter for a legacy. He understood that the path to the summit requires you to burn the bridge to the valley. At 5 in the morning, the man is already at the vineyard gates. The air is cold, and the master offers him a silver coin for a full day's work. It is a fair wage, enough to buy bread, oil, and a small jar of wine for his family. He grips the coin in his mind and enters the fields. For 12 hours he works under a sun that burns like a furnace. His skin turns dark, his hands crack from the vines, and the dust of the dry earth fills his lungs. Every hour he counts the rows he has finished, picturing the silver coin. At noon, the master brings more workers. At 3 he brings more. Finally, just 1 hour before sunset, a group of men who had been standing idle in the marketplace are brought in. They work in the cool of the evening, their clothes still clean, their brows barely damp. When the sun sets, the master calls everyone for payment. The men who worked for only 60 minutes are called first. The 12-hour laborer watches from the back, his eyes fixed on their hands. He sees the master drop a silver coin into each of theirs. His heart leaps. If they got a silver coin for 1 hour, he calculates, I will surely get 12. He begins to plan the feast he will buy. But when he reaches the front, the master drops a single silver coin into his palm, exactly what they agreed upon at dawn. Suddenly, the coin feels like hot lead. The silver hasn't changed its value, but the laborer's world has collapsed. He looks at his blistered hands, and then at the clean hands of the newcomers. He begins to shout about fairness and justice. He walked into the vineyard a successful man with a guaranteed living. He walks out a miserable man with a heart full of poison. He wasn't robbed by the master, he was robbed by his own eyes. By staring at another man's contract, he turned his own success into a bitter failure. The market fulfilled the agreement, but his ego demanded a different math. The town was buzzing with the news of the first house. It was rising at an incredible speed on the beautiful, flat sands of the bay. The builder was a man of action, a man who understood momentum. Within weeks, the walls were up, the roof was shingled, and the windows were polished to a shine. People gathered to marvel at the efficiency. "This is how it's done," they whispered. The builder held parties on his deck, watching the sunset, his life perfectly integrated with the view. He was the hero of the season, a man who didn't waste a second. Meanwhile, a few miles away on a jagged ridge of grey stone, another man was barely visible. He spent his days in a deep, dark hole. He wasn't laying bricks, he was swinging a heavy iron bar against solid rock. He was sweating in the shadows while the sun was out. Weeks passed, and he had nothing to show for it but piles of rubble and a hole that looked like a grave. The townspeople laughed when they walked by. "He's still digging," they joked. "The summer will be over before he lays a single stone." The man said nothing. He kept swinging until he hit the cold, unyielding bedrock. Only then did he begin to pour his cement. His house was small, squat, and took months to complete. It was grey and lacked the flash of the seaside villa. One night, the air turned heavy and the birds went silent. A hurricane, unpredicted and massive, slammed into the coast. The wind screamed at 100 miles an hour, and the ocean rose up like a wall. In the morning, the beach was clean. The beautiful house on the sand was gone. Not a single splinter remained to show where it once stood. The sand had simply shifted, and the structure had folded into the surf. But up on the ridge, the grey house was still there. A few shingles were missing, and the windows were battered, but the frame hadn't moved an inch. It didn't stand because it was stronger than the wind. It stood because it was physically part of the planet. The man in the sand had optimized for the sun, but the man in the rock had optimized for the storm. He understood that in a world of variables, depth is the only constant that survives.